Hey, what's up? So tonight I'm going to try to do something different with my channel. Now, I've been watching true crime stories for many years on YouTube and on several TV shows, on cable TV, and true crime has always interested me. Now, this is one of my first podcasts, so it's going to be rough around the edges. So, if you don't know what I usually do videos about pretty much all sorts of things, especially I talk about antiques and I talk about everyday life situations. And tonight we're going to delve into something different with my channel. So we're going to go into a case that is actually haunting me. So this is a case that actually happened in close to my old neighborhood where I used to live in Queens, New York. Now, for those of you who don't know where Queens, New York is, Queens, New York happens to be one of the boroughs of New York City. So you have the Bronx, you have Manhattan, you have Queens, you have Staten Island, you have all sorts of boroughs going around, and Brooklyn, and you have all sorts of boroughs going and making up New York City. Now, New York is one big state, so when everybody thinks of New York, they picture New York City. But New York is a ginormous state, and New York City, though, makes up most of the news due to the fact that there's high crime. So this particular story is really haunting me. Now, this takes place in Forest Hills, Queens, New York. Now, Forest Hills, Queens, New York is one of the last places in Queens, New York, and there's just a few that actually is like an area that's more upper class, affluent people. Now, the rest of New York City, pretty much, besides some areas of Manhattan, is pretty much, your working class type of gritty type of neighborhoods. Nothing special. Here's an example. I'm going to show you something. In Queens, New York, not far from where this crime happened, these are the type of houses you get for $895,000. I'm not kidding you. I grew up near this area. And back when I was a child, this was actually a nice area. But this is what everything pretty much in a lot of the areas of Queens, New York looks like. Pretty run down, pretty seedy, high crime, and high prices. So if you want to buy a two-family little attached little bungalow here in Queens, New York, you're going to be paying about $600,000 to $895,000 for one of these type of places. Okay, but where this takes place, this actually takes place in an area that has $2 million houses. Okay, so I'm going to show you one more example of a typical house in Queens, New York. And again, I grew up in Woodhaven, which is not too far from Forest Hills. We're talking probably about a mile and a half away. So we have this house attached on one side, and barely any room to the right of it, $725,000. Now, these houses are teeny, tiny little bungalows, and that's the type of living you get in New York City. Quite sad. I'm glad I moved out to Long Island. Okay, so back to the story. So this takes place in a nicer area of Queens, New York, not many left behind, and in a small Tudor home that is a $2 million house. Now, mind you, this is what gets you a home for $2 million in New York, which is quite insane. Not a big house, a regular postage stamp sized backyard, not too much property in between the houses, and that's $2 million. This is where the crime takes place. A crime so heinous, so terrifying, so haunting that it's gotten me very, very sad. Okay, so I'm going to read the case, and we're going to go over now. I'm being an armchair detective. For those of you who are more into these true crime shows, you're going to probably know a lot of many other channels that explain this stuff way better than me. This is my first stab at it, no pun intended. And it's not going to be the greatest. It's going to be rough around the edges, so bear with me. Okay, so I cannot pronounce this poor woman's name, the deceased, God rest her soul, but we'll call her Orso, because I cannot pronounce Orsolya very rapidly as I speak. So her name will be Orso for this particular video. Okay, so the headline reads, "Your wife sent me to jail some years ago. I'm back." Killer's chilling text to Queen's mom's husband after he murdered her in the basement of their $2 million home and stuffed her body in a duffel bag. And that part is the part that really haunts me. So Orsolya Gaal, 51, told her youngest son she was going out to watch a show, met up with another man instead, NYPD sources told PIX 11 News. She returned home that night, but was later killed inside, and then her body was dragged out in a duffel bag. Surveillance camera footage shows someone wheeling the bag down the street outside her home. The killer used her phone to text Orsolya's husband, Howard Klein, saying, "Your whole family is next." PIX News cites sources say the killer also told Howard, "Your wife sent me to jail some years ago. I'm back." Police questioned Orso's 13-year-old son, but he was later released without charge. Her husband and other son conveniently were out of town visiting colleagues when she was murdered. No one was arrested for the gruesome killing. Now, this just happened this past weekend. The killer, who murdered married Queen's mother, Orsolya Gaal, sent her husband a text afterwards saying it was revenge for her sending him to jail years ago, according to unnamed police sources. Gaal, 51, found dead inside a bloody duffel bag on the side of the road, less than a half a mile from her home in Forest Hills, Queens, at 8:11 a.m. on Saturday. No one has been arrested for her death. Police questioned her 13-year-old son, Leo, who is thought to have been at home when she was killed, but he was released quickly without charge. Gaal's equities advisor husband, Howard Klein, and their oldest son, Jamie, were out of town visiting colleagues at the time of the murder. Police believe Orso went out for the night on Saturday, possibly with a man, then returned home. She was killed inside the basement of her home, then dragged out in a bag, they say. Unnamed sources tell the news that she had told her son, and of course this is covered, she was going out with friends, but was in fact out with another man. After she was murdered, police believe the killer used her phone to text her husband and say, "Your whole family is next." Sources say they told the husband, "Your wife sent me to jail some years ago. I'm back." On Saturday, Gaal's husband, Klein, told New York Post, "My son Leo is safe. Thank God my son is safe. There are concerns about our safety. Our lives are at risk." Surveillance footage also emerged showing someone in a hoodie wheeling the bag near her home at around 4:30 a.m. The bag is similar to one used by her 13-year-old son and could have been taken from the home by the killer. So here's the surveillance, which is very, very badly pixelated, and you see someone pulling the bag. So this is very haunting. I mean, right on the side of the road next to Forest Park, and I will show you Forest Park. Forest Park is actually one of the last oases of beauty in Queens, New York. Now, I grew up there. It's a very gritty place, but you would never know it from seeing Forest Park. And here's some views. It's very, very wooded. It's very, very beautiful. They have horse trails. As a matter of fact, as a child, I used to go horseback riding in this very park myself. They have carousels. They have a very, very old Muller hand-carved carousel in the middle of there, a bandstand. You can see this beautiful old, it's like a Parks Department house on the top of the hill there. There's golf, there's golf in there. There's just beautiful scenery that is just absolutely unrivaled, except for Central Park in New York City. Okay, so she lived very close, within a few blocks from this beautiful park in Queens, New York. And there's not very many parks like this in the boroughs of New York City. There's a few, but pretty much it's gritty, it's seedy, it's crime-ridden. There's projects all over the place and many, many Section 8 buildings. And people that are just struggling to get by, but she just so happened to live in the last bastion of a good area of basically Queens, New York. Okay, back to the story. So, how her body was found is quite startling. Okay, it was quite. I mean, I can only imagine the person that found this on the side of the road. I would be haunted for life by that sight. Okay, here's the bag that was found, that was left right on the side of what I just showed you, Forest Park, next to a major parkway by the name of the Jackie Robinson Parkway. Now, the Jackie Robinson used to be called the Interborough Parkway. Here's the entrance onto it right now. It's a very, very narrowy type of parkway that leads you to other major arteries of larger, like expressways and parkways, to get you towards Brooklyn and to get you towards Long Island. It's a very, very small, windy parkway that doesn't last for too long, but leads you into many other places, just to give you an idea. Now, here's the area where she lived. Beautiful, beautiful Tudor homes, not similar to the type of homes that I showed you that are very typical for the area, like I showed you here. Very attached, very, very small bungalow type of houses, nothing spectacular. Basically, not your $2 million house that she lived in. Okay, so here's some pictures that she posted, I guess, on social media. Her with her little dog, beautiful little dog. Her wedding pictures of her and her family. So her husband was actually an executive, I believe. He owned some kind of business. It was a boutique-based business with capital markets, advisory type of firm. So he was doing well for somebody living in that type of area to be able to afford a lifestyle like that. Okay, so here's the person that found the body. And this is quite strikingly horrendous, horrible. I can only imagine the terror of the person that found this. A guy by the name of Van Nostrand, 51, who had been walking through the park with his 2 hunting dogs, told the New York Post he noticed what he said was a black Bauer hockey duffel bag while he headed down the busy street to his nearby home. Mr. Nostrand did not think much of the discovery at first. Now, this is a thing with New Yorkers, and as a former New York City dweller, we don't really pay attention to the stuff around us because we've seen some pretty crazy, like, shit. Yeah, excuse my language. We see pretty crazy shit. Living in New York City, you see the most absolutely batshit crazy things in the streets. So after a while, you learn not to really look around unless every so often you look to your left, to your right, behind your shoulders. Make sure there's no danger about you, but you pretty much look down. You don't look around because there's a lot of weirdos and a lot of things that go on that you don't want to see. You know what I mean? Okay. So Van Nostrand, who had been walking through the park with his 2 hunting dogs, told the Post he noticed what he said was a black Bauer hockey duffel bag while he headed down the busy street to his nearby home. Now, most New Yorkers, when they see a duffel bag on the side of the road, just walk past it and don't do a damn thing. That's normal. I'm not kidding you. Walking down the streets in the boroughs of New York City, that is not something that is out of the ordinary. Although out of the ordinary for most people in most towns. Mr. Nostrand did not think much of the discovery at first, he told the paper, but bizarre behavior from his 2 hound dogs spurred him to look inside. They are scent hounds, he said. They see the world through their noses. When he opened the bag, he found the mangled body, which he said had been packed in the bag in a fetal position. Now, at this point, I'm sorry, I would have probably crapped my pants and threw up. To me, he said, it looked like a mannequin. It didn't look very fleshy. It was more like a crash test dummy. I thought it was maybe some equipment being used for something. I didn't think anything of it. Then the Queens resident said he noticed black, ankle-length jeans, a belt, and a woman's waist, and came to the realization it was real, and it was a body. It was a real body. Eventually noticing blood on the other side of the bag after having opened it. I thought, oh my goodness, and called the police, he said, adding that he told dispatchers who answered his call, there's a body in this bag. He told of how another gentleman, who is not identified by the cops, had called earlier about the body bag, but officers had not arrived on the scene at that point. Now I'll stop. Okay, how it is explained here, how the officers had not arrived on the scene, it took them a while basically to show up. It's because, like I was telling you earlier, you see some weird ass things on the sides of the road in New York City, and most people don't think twice about it. Like, there's discarded stuff on the sides of the roads all day long. And so a duffel bag on the side of the road would generally not really pique anyone's interest unless there was something really, really odd about it. But that's something that you find on sides of roads all the time. And as a New York City resident, ex-New York City resident, I used to see that all the time. Never thought once of unzipping it, to be quite honest. Afraid of what would be inside of it. But you pretty much walk on and just ignore it. Okay? So basically his dogs kept, hinting towards there's something going on there. Now apparently there was a trail of blood leading from that bag all the way back to that house. Okay, so I'm thinking pretty much this is pretty fishy. This whole case is absolutely odd. And what the oddest points are, here's my points. Okay, who had the password to the phone? Don't usually people lock their phones? I mean, I know every single person in my house. If I were to pick up my husband's phone or my teenage daughter's phones, it would be locked. So the killer had to have known either a passcode or had some kind of fingerprint. I don't understand how someone could pick up her phone and text her husband unless they had some kind of access to her phone. Okay, point number 2. She was stabbed, I believe, 58 times. Now, I know people that are retired NYPD detectives, NYPD detectives and non-retired NYPD detectives. And I was always told that anytime somebody is stabbed, not 1 time, 3 times, 5 times, but 10, 20, 30, 50, 60 times, it's a crime of passion. It's usually a crime of great hatred or some kind of passion type of induced crime where somebody was so outraged, so irate, that's why it's like overkill, where you just keep stabbing and stabbing and stabbing. Okay, here's another thing that really, really, really makes me wonder. The 13-year-old son is home in the house. Now, you saw how little this house is. This is not your average $2 million mansion. Now, being a person that lived in several Queens houses over the years, these houses are so small that it's not like if you're on the top floor, you'll hear if someone's yelling or hollering or screaming, you'll hear it. Trust me, I've lived in these type of houses and you hear everybody's conversations, especially the houses I showed you that are attached on both sides. You could actually hear your neighbors' conversations through the walls. Okay? So if the 13-year-old son is in that house, she has a dog, she's being brutally attacked even though it's in the basement, you would be screaming on the top of your lungs bloody murder. Not only that, the dog had to be familiar with this person in that house. Now, me owning several dogs, I noticed that anytime anyone passes by my house, someone just walking down the street randomly, my dogs will catapult themselves at the window, barking and barking and barking until the person is gone. So you're telling me that this dog did not bark? Did not raise the alarm for the son to hear? She did not scream loud enough for him to hear? Now, if you're being stabbed, you're going to be screaming on the top of your lungs. Okay, no car. This is another thing that really, really sort of befuddles me. The person pushing the bag from the house, which was a few blocks away, maybe probably half a mile, to the park, did not have a car. He dragged the body in a bag with wheels on it. That is really quite strange. It was like no getaway. You just go along a 4-lane, this is heavily trafficked. There are so many accidents that happen in this spot over here. There are red light cameras, there are, surveillance cameras all in this area. Especially people try to beat this light all the time and go through reds all the time just to get onto the parkway. Okay, that is really strange. Okay, another thing, the stature of the person in the video pushing the bag looks very, very short, very, very small. If you notice, this bag must be about I'm going to guess, I don't know the size of hockey bags. They're quite big, I hear. At least 4 feet, maybe 4.5, 5 feet tall. So if this bag probably comes up to about here on this person, this is not a tall person. You could see it from the tree. Another thing, you're noticing the person's carrying something in their hand and possibly a backpack. My guess is this person was covered in blood, especially if you're stabbing somebody multiple times. The blood makes the knife slippery. You end up cutting up your hands. This person had to get rid of the clothing they were wearing and probably brought a change of clothes in this backpack or bag. And you can easily go into Forest Park where he left the body and just change your clothes in the bushes, and get back to the house really easily and quickly. Okay, that's another point. Also, not too many grown adult men wear skinny jeans. Apparently, whatever this person's wearing is very tight fitting, and they have very thin legs. Could this possibly be a child or a woman? Very, 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 very telling here. Okay, another thing. This bag was left outside the entrance of the park, so somebody could find it quickly. This is not your typical thing. Wouldn't somebody that wants to get away with a murder hide the body? At least in this park that's acres and hundreds of acres large. I mean, it goes on for miles. That's another thing. Another question I have is the odd text. The killer saying your family is next, but left the 13-year-old son in the house at the time of the murder alive. That's really strange. And the fact that the husband was conveniently away, that's another one. Also, what's really strange is that the killer showed up basically with no bag to transport the body, no car apparently. But yet there happened to be a bag big enough in that house to fit a woman that looks like she weighed at least about she was very petite looking, about maybe 125 to 150 pounds. It's very, very fishy. This is a very fishy case. Now, again, the family members that I know that are in law enforcement have told me that pretty much 90% of these type of crimes are done by family members. A husband, an ex-husband, a cousin, a brother, a sister, a son. Yeah, I don't think there's a serial killer on the loose. And this is just really haunting. I believe that they're going to find out what happened really soon. There's surveillance cameras all over the place. And somebody has to have surveillance in one of these homes, outside these homes, that captured better footage than what we saw here. So what are your comments? I want to hear what your opinions are here below. Who could it be? Could it be the son, the younger son who is home alone with her? Could the husband have hired a hitman? Could maybe the husband and the other son may have not have gone away? Because apparently they tweeted or they went on social media saying something about that they were away, looking at colleges somewhere, and then that tweet or that social media statement disappeared, I heard. Very, very strange. Really, really hauntingly. It just affects me. It's haunting. It's just the fact that a body of a woman was dragged in this bag. Now, one other question. If this happened in the basement, this person had to drag this bag up the stairs. Apparently, they may have had help. Because if it's a young man, it looks like a young person, or another woman, perhaps, maybe the guy she met, maybe the wife found out that she was meeting her husband or boyfriend. And this could be a woman. Somebody may have had help dragging this body. It's not easy to drag a body, even if it's only 100 pounds, up a stairs in a bag. Especially knowing Queens houses like I know, those basement stairs are very, very narrow. And very hard to maneuver. So something is rotten in Denmark. Well, something is rotten in Queens. And something is very strange. So I'm going to conclude this video. I want to know what you think in the comments below. Sorry if this was an unpolished true crime video. I may not do any more of these anymore. You may probably blast me in the comments below and say I suck at this. But who knows? Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys all soon. So long.